Welcome back everybody. In this session we will talk about REST and how developers work with REST. As we said before, REST uses HTTP requests to exchange data between clients and server. So for example, this is a sample CRUD operations. CRUD stands for create, read, update and delete. So if client wants to create entity on the backend server, it sends HTTP post request to the endpoint with the data you have to create, and the backend server return the result to the client, for example status success. To read data, client will send HTTP GET request and will receive the data you want to read. If client wants to update data, he will send the HTTP bot request and the backend server will process the request and update the data and return the result. If clients want to delete entity, will send HTTP delete request to the API backend server. But we have to say that this is the standard, but it's not the case for all API. Some developers which is not familiar with REST or just don't want to follow the standard, they use HTTP GET and HTTP POST for all operations. So he can use HTTP POST to delete entity or update entity, so be careful and don't expect the developers to follow the standards. But anyway, according to the standards, you must use every HTTP methods according to the operation you want to do. About HTTP methods, if you wanted to read resource, you use get or head. If you wanted to create resource, you use post request. If you wanted to update resource, you use put or patch request. If you wanted to delete resource, you use delete request. The most common methods is get, post, put and delete. And we will focus in this course on these four methods, but there is other methods worth mention like connect, options and trace. Okay, as we said before, REST consists of HTTP request and HTTP response. So let's have a look at HTTP headers sent with request first. There is too many headers sent with request and with the response. If you want to dig further, search on Google, you will find great resources about the headers. But we will focus on a couple of them now. First header we wanted to focus on is authentication header. Authentication header used to authenticate or authorize the current user. For example, authorization pair followed by the token. We will have a long talk about authentication and authorization in the following modules. The second header we want to focus on is content negotiation header, basically accept header. The client who made the request to the backend server needs to say what data structure he accepts. So for example, if you have a mobile application and backend server, the mobile application sent accept header that he accepted the application/JSON. In this case, he tells the backend server that he only accepts JSON data. So the backend server will return the data in this format. But again, it's a standard, but the developer can ignore it. So for example, the application he accepts application/JSON and backend server return text/XML. Lastly, there is cookie header. The client can send the cookie stored in the client to the backend server in favor of authentication or tracking or any other goal. This is the most three common types of header. And these three types of headers you want to focus on when you deal with HTTP requests. Okay, now let's see what headers returns in the response. First, there is a type of authentication the server wants. So for example, if you send a request with no authentication and server require basic authentication, server supposed to send you header like this:   'authenticate basic. to tell the client he wants to authenticate by using basic authentication. And there is content negotiation header. The server exposes what type of content he returned in the request body. For example, the server returned HTML, so the content type will be text/HTML. And if server wants to set a new cookie on the client, he return header called setCookie with key and value of the cookie he wants to plant in the client. There is another important header to look for in the response is HTTP access control or CORS. This header for cross-origin requests means that you request a resource from another domain or subdomain. This header actually for the browser to control across AJAX requests from front end to back end. The first one is access control allow origin. It controls which domain or subdomain is allowed to access this URL with cross requests. Second one is access control allow methods, which controls what methods allowed in cross requests. Lastly, developer can return any custom header with the response usually prefixed with X-. Okay. Any HTTP response returned need to have status code. Status code indicates the result of the request. For example, if the request success and returned the result, the response will have status code 200 or 201. But if you request a non-existent URL, the response will have status code 404. Here is the most common status code you will get in HTTP response. 200 OK, 201 created, 301 moved, this is for redirect, 400 bad requests, 401 unauthorized, 403 forbidden, 404 not found, and 405 method not allowed, 500 internal server error. Again, we need to understand that it's the standard, but developer can return any status code he wants. For example, some developers make exceptions, show status code 404 not found instead of 500 internal server error. Okay, let's have a quick example for query data. This is the API client and this is the API endpoint in the backend server. So here we want to query data for authenticated user. Client send GET request to the endpoint and the endpoint process the request and return 200 OK response along with data in JSON format. And we have create example as well. This is example for e-commerce website to add product and shopping cart. So here's the API client sends post request to the API endpoint with product ID and quantity, and the endpoint will process the request and return 201 created with a status success. Okay, that's all for now. See you next time. Thank you.